tandem, or could be made to do so with a timely payoff. Gowdy's political ties enhanced his appeal to the clients who secured his services. He represented the Vanderbilt Railroad Empire, the great Armour meatpacking firm, and other powerful interests in their wars against government regulation. It was said that Congress passed the Interstate Commerce Act in part to counteract Gowdy, who so ably promoted the rights of corporations and monopolists to run their affairs as they saw fit, without regard to the public interest. Gowdy and the railroad were, this day, engaged in one such battle with the people of Chicago. The great midway between the crops and natural resources of the West and the markets and capital of the East was a wicker of railroad tracks. 5 million engines and freight cars passed through Chicago each year on 1,400 miles of rails. As the city's population leaped, so did the number of those killed and injured by trains traversing its roads and alleys at the thousands of street-level crossings. It was Darrow's duty to represent the railroad in court, fighting to limit the compensation sought by the victims or their families. The carnage was ghastly. A stranger's first impression of Chicago is that of the barbarous gridironed streets, a British visitor wrote. His second is that of the multitude of mutilated people, the mangled remnant of the massacre. In a single month that spring, there were 45 deaths. One story suffices, that of the mother driving home, who froze at the roar of an approaching train. A passer-by pulled her from the driver's bench, but her 2 young daughters were left behind to be shattered and tossed in the shards of the carriage as their wounded horse bellowed in pain. But the railroads were tough and abetted by public officials who collected lavish bribery year after year, the Chicago Times reported. When finally the city council voted to compel the railroads to raise their tracks, the companies went to court. "There is no power on earth which can compel us to elevate our tracks," said a confident Marvin Hewitt, the president of the Chicago and Northwestern. "The opinions of the best lawyers in the country have been obtained." A test case was pending at the Supreme Court, and earlier that month Gowdy had traveled to Washington to speak to the Chief Justice and visit with his allies at the White House. He returned to Chicago cheered about his company's prospects. Here, then, was a blueprint for Darrow's aspirations. He was no scion of a wealthy family like his liberal friends, the muckraker Henry Demarest Lloyd, or the philanthropist Jane Addams, who used her inheritance to found the Hull House settlement for immigrants in Chicago's West Side ghetto. Darrow's parents, though educated, were moneyless. He tasted want and shame as a child, and "I've never been able to get over the dread of being poor, and the fear of it," he would confide to a friend. Nor were there government programs in this laissez-faire era for a man to fall back on in hard times, illness, or old age. The only social safety net was the free lunch offered in working men's saloons, and a bit of floor space on which to sleep in municipal hallways during Chicago's bitter winters. Darrow had a deep interest in learning and in literature, but he has been under the awful compulsion of the age to make money, his friend Bran Whitlock would tell a confidant. "Have you ever reflected that we of this time are kept so busy making a living that we never find time to live?" Yet Darrow chafed in corporate harness. There was something missing in the Gowdy model. If Darrow's cunning was a defining attribute, more so was his empathy. He was sensitiveness and egotism all twisted as the strands of a rope, a great character of wonderful sweetness, of profound intelligence, of godlike patience and tenderness, shot through with queer pettiness about money, about criticism. One of his lovers, Mary Field Parton, would confide to her diary. "What saved him was his extraordinarily acute compassion," she concluded, "the edges of his emotion sensitive as the antennae of insects." Darrow felt guilty working for a corporation, where his legal skills and his boss's clout were employed at union busting, or to limit the relief sought by the pitiful victims of the railway crossings. He longed for peace of mind. "It seems to me,"